Up+Adam.
Tractor systems are offline.
We are Beyond FM.
Beyond FM.
The future of broadcasting is here.
Up+Adam with Adam Montiel. It's community content from Concentrate. It's Up+Adam with Adam Montiel.
Some say life is where it begins. Straight to the stars is where it ends. Yes, some say life is just where it begins. Straight to the stars is where it ends. Only to start again.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for being Up+Adam. True Crime Tuesday. Yeah. True Crime Tuesday indeed. And there are few events in American history that still haunt our national psyche as far as crime, like November 22nd, 1963. Yeah, we're going there. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy wasn't just a tragedy. It was the ignition point of a million questions, conspiracy theories, and cover-ups. For decades, the official story has been spoon-fed to the public like gospel. A lone gunman, 3 shots, end of story, right? What if that story was never meant to hold up in the light? What if the truth was not just inconvenient, but deeply, institutionally buried? Coming up later in the show, we're going to be joined by a man who walked away from the Congressional JFK investigation when he realized the fix was in. Robert K. Tanenbaum is a powerhouse federal prosecutor, legal expert, and the author of That Day in Dallas. Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill JFK. Guess you're not mincing words, my man. With over 100 felony trials under his belt and 0 losses, he's not here with guesses. He's here with evidence. He's talking falsified documents, sealed reports, hidden shooters, and why the CIA and the FBI may have been playing a very different game than the one the American people were told. If you think you know the story of JFK's assassination, ooh, man, you just don't. Not until you hear what Robert Tanenbaum has to say. He's going to be saying it later on. I am excited for this chat, no doubt. All right, before that, you remember, this is a What the Food segment, WTF. So you remember when eggs got stupid expensive, right? During, wasn't even just during the pandemic, but like after, like towards the end of the last administration, like $5-6 a dozen. Most of us chalked it up to inflation, because that was also a problem in the last administration. That nasty bird flu, that was an issue we were told a lot. But the Washington Post just cracked into a deeper layer of that omelet. And what they found, it smells funky. The country's largest egg producer, Cal Maine Foods, looks like the 2 states, Cal and then the word Maine, like M-A-I-N-E. They recorded record profits during the crisis. Over 700% profit jump in 1 quarter. Like what? And while their execs were cashing checks, they were also cutting egg output and driving prices across the board. A new congressional investigation is now accusing Cal Maine of potential price gouging. The FTC found texts between execs celebrating, quote, extraordinary profitability. Oh, God, it makes you so mad. And emails where they strategized, quote, not to expand supply, even though they totally could have. Why? Because tightening supply meant juicier margins, baby. Yeah. Now, here's the kicker. Unlike gas stations, egg producers don't really have regulation when it comes to pricing. There's no federal anti-gouging law that covers eggs, you know? So unless the FTC brings the hammer down for unfair competition, it's all technically legal, just seriously morally scrambled. Yes, pun intended. So yeah, next time you're staring at crazy prices for an egg carton of eggs, I guess what else would an egg carton be full of? It might not just be the hens who are getting fleeced. Yeah, we are too. What a story. That was an interesting one. Let's see, what is going on? Got to tell you about Pink Drink. Super excited. Not only because Pink Drink tickets are available now, pinkdrink.org, but you can win your way in. AdamMontiel.com. Saturday, July 12th, the Elks Lodge in Slow. Oh, yeah, it'll never be the same again. Over 30 of the hottest producers in wine, beer, cider, spirits, craft cocktails, all poolside, all dressed in pink. Curated bites, past apps, live DJ. Come on now, this isn't your average tasting. This is summer served sexy, and it all supports a great cause. We love the Woods Humane Society over here. We love the Elks National Foundation, the work they do with Veterans Affairs, scholarships, youth activities. But Woods Humane Society, come on, you know they're really, really close to me. So you can party with purpose. This is an exclusive for the grown and sexy, 21 and over. It's priced like it shouldn't be. We're talking $65 for hours and hours of music, swimming, fun, food, drank. Come on. Pink Drank, D-R-A-N-K, pinkdrank.org. And yes, get to adammontiel.com. You want to try to win some tickets? You can do that now. adammontiel.com. Right off the homepage. Can't miss it. Let's go.
It's Up and Adam with Adam Montiel.
All right, my guest today isn't just someone who studied the JFK assassination. Dude was inside the investigation. Robert K. Tanenbaum is a legendary trial attorney who never lost a felony case, a best-selling author, a former Deputy Chief Counsel for the U.S. Congressional investigation into the assassinations of both President JFK and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He's prosecuted the worst of the worst, served as mayor of Beverly Hills, even taught law at Berkeley. But in his latest book, That Day in Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald Did Not Kill JFK, pulls back the curtain in a way that might just change what you think you know about that day and the decades of deception that followed. With stunning documentation and an insider's eye, he lays out a case not of conspiracy theory, but of government obstruction, falsified evidence, and a truth that refused to stay buried. Please welcome the fearless, the formidable Robert K. Tanenbaum. Sir, thank you so much for being Up and Adam.
Well, thank you for giving me the time.
Yeah, you know what? You've said the Warren Commission wasn't just flawed, it was dishonest. And that's not a mistake, that's intent. What's the biggest difference between a government cover-up and a conspiracy? And which one do you think we're dealing with here?
Well, call it what you want. The bottom line is, from the investigation that Senator Schweiker, Richard Schweiker, engaged in as part of the member of the Church Committee, Senator Church's committee in the mid-'70s, you may recall, Schweiker was very much involved in investigating the executive committee's responses to the assassinations of President Kennedy and Martin Luther King. And he called me up the very first week I was in Washington, wanted to see me. I went to see to his office. He gave me his notes, and he said, what I have to tell you is rather gut-wrenching, particularly from your background. He knew I was in the DA's office for 10 years in Manhattan, the legendary DA Frank Hogan. I was in charge of the Homicide Bureau and the criminal courts, and had prosecuted more cases than anyone except for Richard Sprague. And Sprague is the one who hired me. He called me up in October of '76 and asked me to go to Washington to handle the investigation into the assassination of President Kennedy, which I did. And that investigation was based upon immutable evidence, just like the way I tried cases and prosecuted them, and scientific and visual and audio and acoustical. And so Schweiker's opinion was important only from the point of view of an experienced person who was not looking for a cheap interview. And he said that from his investigation, it indicated, in his opinion, that the CIA was involved in the assassination of the President of the United States. That's a pretty heavy thing to take. And I thought, coming from the DA's office, I prosecuted when I was in the DA's office, I would say, 2 cases a month. Some months more, you know the story, some less. You do the math on that for 10 years. And Sprague was an incredible person, a wonderful person, a high integrity, and without question, the right person to be in charge. And I was his chief assistant. He asked me to take that position. And so off we go to Washington, and Schweiker then comes up with what he calls knowingly telling me what his committee found. So it was not just, one person, one committee thing. I'm glad that he investigated the case from the Senate side. It gave broad perspective, and it did not influence me or Sprague, but it was a very important finding he made, and he was right, as it turned out. And in it, I was able to find out some incredible evidence. For example, part of what the so-called trusted experts in Washington were about was to keep from the American people the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald was a contracted employee of the CIA and the FBI since 1957. He was at Sugi Air Force Base monitoring these U-2 flights. And as a result of the Bay of Pigs fiasco, JFK fired Allen Dulles. And Allen Dulles was replaced by John McCone. And on March 3rd, 1964, McCone, in response to an inquiry made by James Rowley, chief of the Secret Service, Rowley was concerned about leaks about Lee Harvey Oswald being a contract employee of the CIA and the FBI. This was what was uppermost in their mind, was to deceive the American public. And McCone, who was then now head of the CIA, he wrote this note. He said, "I'm concerned that if this information about Oswald was disclosed, it would lead the media erroneously to claim that this agency, meaning the CIA and perhaps others, were directly involved in the Dallas action." The Dallas action, as I'm sure you know, is how they refer to the assassination. And then he goes on to the top of page 6, paragraph 6 of, this is page 2, paragraph 6. He says, while the persons, get this is from the head of the CIA, while the persons involved in the assassinations were in the employ of the CIA, as well as the FBI, he goes on to say it's impossible to maintain full oversight 24 hours a day of our agents. Well, isn't that interesting? Wow. While the persons involved in the assassination were in the employ of the CIA, this is the head of the CIA. You know, when you're trying cases and you get a piece of evidence like this, which is verified, by the way, going back to 1978 with respect to going into the archives and pulling this thing out, your perspective is, you look heavenly. The piece is so incriminating and is supportive of your position that you look heavenly and you say, okay, thank you, God. I can take over from here now myself. It's sort of like, a sense of removing the weight of it all, in a sense of responsibilities, that you can do that in a jocular way, if you will. But it's true in that the government has knowingly contrived a predetermined conclusion through the pretense of an investigation. Why they do that? Because the CIA has, in its realm of distortions, it was concerned, and this I say in response to why they killed JFK. This is, to me, the one thing that is, I call immutable evidence, scientific and visual and audio, acoustics. But this is more the logic of it all. But I'll give you my opinion on it. And that is, JFK was literally mortified at what happened at the Bay of Pigs. And he was told that we would give air cover. That means we would bomb Cuba. That's what Nixon et al. Agreed to in '59, because they were supposed to win the election in '60, as you well know. So the bottom line here was, what do we do with this information? And that comes out with respect to, again, the truth at Dealey Plaza. But in order to deal with all this stuff, you have to have hardcore evidence and facts. And the forensic medical panel report, for example, indicated the strength of what I'm talking about. It said that the Parkland doctors must be mistaken because of the evulsive wound to JFK. His head was missing. Clint Hill, who was a Secret Service agent who recently passed away, said when he jumped the car, he looked down, he saw an empty hole in JFK's head. He saw the, pieces of brain hanging out.
So
here's the kicker.
Yeah.
Here's the kicker to the CIA lie. And it says, they said that Parkland doctors must be mistaken because the evulsive head wound was not seen by the 26 witnesses at the Bethesda autopsy. And here's the truth. All 26 witnesses at the Bethesda autopsy not only saw the gaping hole, but reported it to the committee. This is what the CIA does. It makes up facts, it sells them to people, and they just go on their merry way. And that is what has been one of the sticking points with everything that we're talking about.
Before we get more into this story, I'm just curious, when you saw the first assassination attempt of former, it was then former because he was running for re-election of President Trump, what did you, and then everything subsequent from it, did you think, wait a minute, something's going on here, knowing all you know?
Well, I'll tell you what bothers me about that whole thing is how do you get on different channels? They immediately talk about different channels. Who are they kidding? For Christ's sake, you could have screamed to 50 yards and said, hey, get off the rooftop. Get down. We got a potential shooter on the roof.
Right.
We can't do that? That's what kills me about, we were on different channels. Well, wake up. If you have a walkie-talkie and I have one, make sure we can talk to each other from distances, and we don't scream at each other, but we can whisper into the machine and say where we are. And where we are is we got a guy on a roof with a high-powered rifle. Get the president the hell out of there.
Yeah. They call it, back to JFK, the single bullet theory. You describe it more as a bedtime story, something invented just to help people sleep, not really wake them up like we should, right? From a prosecutor's lens, what was the most absurd or indefensible piece of evidence that the government tried to sell to the American people over this?
Oh, it's a good one. Neutron activation analysis, NAA. Neutron activation analysis was considered to be the principal testing component for comparative bullet-lead analysis. What does all that mean? It means that the government was saying, we have science now on our side. Neutron activation analysis. If you don't believe us, you believe, and they literally said this, you believe the earth is flat. Well, I got news for you. Nobody bothered in the government to talk to metallurgical PhDs, all of whom claimed that NAA is an invalid alleged science. Keep this in mind. You want to talk about a lie? Neutron activation analysis. Government said you can match a fragment to a fragment, they said, because there were two large fragments in the limo. That came from one bullet, they said. And therefore, you can match a fragment to a fragment. You can also match a fragment to a bullet, because they said the fragments in Connolly's wrist matched the single bullet that was unscathed, the pristine bullet. Well, the meteorological PhD said that neutron activation analysis is totally invalid, that it is totally fraudulent, and it's a sham. Well, what happens now? The FBI was sending agents into court under oath saying it was good, it was valid. So now they were under the pressure. Media was after them now. So what did they do? They said, look, they said to the experts, these meteorological PhDs, they said, give us 10 of your best. And they did. And they said, we'll approve these people. All 10 said, it's invalid. So what happened? We had the only available lab. And on September 1st, 05, it was ordered to be shut down. We now had no lab. And the government, then the FBI said, to try and gain credibility, the FBI said, you are never, to their agents, you're never to go into court and ever say that NAA is valid. This went from the science to total invalidity. How much more do you, I could go through other stuff for you.
Well, it's
all there. It's all there.
I want to ask
and that's the thing I said to Lou Stokes. Why in the world, again, I mentioned this to you, why in the world aren't others picking this up? That day in Dallas, Oswald did not kill the president. Well, who did? We need to know who did, for the very least, that we can find out how it was really executed, and hopefully it will never happen again. Hopefully.
Yeah.
I mean, the crazies out there who come up with different kinds of plans, but that's, of course, a given. But we need to know what happened at Dealey Plaza that caused JFK's head to violently snap back. It couldn't have been because he was shot by the government three stooges, and they shot him in the head, and his head came back. That is not what happened. We know that.
Yeah, but we know there's two shooters, right? And we know it wasn't the guy in the front seat, right?
Well, we know that there were at least two shooters.
Yeah.
Beyond any.
I want to talk to you about MK Ultra. MK Ultra isn't a theory, it's documented, a government mind control program, right? Launched in secrecy, hidden under layers of deniability. And when people hear whispers tying it to Lee Harvey Oswald or the larger forces behind the JFK assassination, they're told to sit down and stop asking. But what I'm curious, but you've seen what the public hasn't. What can you say truthfully about the possibility that programs like MK Ultra or any other ones played a role in what happened that day in Dallas?
I could only answer that question as honestly as possible. I will not tell you I have an opinion about it because I don't. But I and Richard Sprague use immutable evidence, and I said scientific, audiovisual, and acoustical, in making our determinations on the evidence. And it would be unfair for me to give you an opinion about something that, in my mind, had nothing to do with this. We chased every rat hole down you could chase, and that had to do with LBJ, the so-called mafia. The person who took over after we left had never tried a case in his life. He had never investigated a homicide case. And what did he do? He hired CIA people, well-known CIA agents, to run the investigation.
Right.
That's what happened. And what do you expect happened here? It was, one of the issues here was that at page, this is interesting to me, at page, 37 of the report, the Forensic Medical Panel report of August 78, page 37, this was the Parkland doctors, must have been mistaken about the evulsive head wound. Why? Because the 26 witnesses at Bethesda during the autopsy did not in any way see a head injury, when they knew that not only did they see the head injury, that the CIA is alleging didn't see the head injury, not only did they see it, but they reported to the House Select Committee on Assassinations that they saw it.
So if...
know that this is a phony organization.
Yeah. So if no real MK Ultra bells ring for you, even if you look at Oswald's timeline, Mexico City, the aliases, the odd-com, have you seen any evidence, firsthand or through investigation, that someone connected to the JFK case was under any manipulation, any surveillance, or any psychological conditioning?
Well, that I don't know, but I do know that the government knowingly contrived the predetermined conclusions.
Yeah.
Why would they do that? It was the CIA we're talking about, through the pretense of an investigation. This, from the beginning, was controlled by the CIA. After all, after we left in March. We left after 4 months, basically, Sprague and I, because they interfered with the investigation. Mm-hmm. They were trying to tell us what to say. We told them, if you dare do that, we will leave this investigation. And we did. So that what did they do? As I told you, they hired some incompetent, and what does the incompetent do? Hires CIA operatives, Giannini's, and others. These are well-known CIA people. And that's where they expected to get the truth from? After all of these cover-ups? We have scientific evidence called neutron activation analysis. No, you don't. The PhDs here, the metallurgicals of the world laid it out that it's invalid, NAA, that the government said this is the truth now. It's sad because we're dealing here with a very critical issue, aren't we?
Yeah.
Who murdered our in broad daylight at 12:30 in the afternoon at Dealey Plaza.
You know, as far as JFK, you were inside. You walked away when they blocked the truth. But what if they didn't? Let's take another route. If you were allowed to fully pursue the case, no stone unturned, how do you think history would read differently today?
Well, I mean, substantially. First of all, the whole issue with JFK could have been avoided. I mean, I start with that. And that there's no way that our government should be run by an agency, an unelected group of people. If the Article 1 people, the legislative branch wants to have legislation about ABC and then have sanctions if you violate it, they have the right to do that. An agency doesn't, and the Supreme Court just came down with a case right on point that this is something that the Chevron presumption doesn't apply anymore. It's like, if the agency says it, it's okay. No, it's not okay. The agency is creating rules and regulations, unelected people, and they have sanctions if you violate them. Well, that's not the world we should be living in. So Article 1 should have independent meaning. Article 2, of course, the executive branch is a whole other issue. And the issue is that Article 3, the judiciary, should have jurisdiction the length of the courtroom of a federal district court judge, period. Not have national influence over what the president has passed and wants to see done, was elected on, and then say, no, we're sorry, we're not going to do that. They have no business doing it, and these judges know this. But they're getting away with it because the politics has taken over every aspect of our life.
Yeah.
We got to get back on track. And that's the whole Kennedy thing.
Yeah.
We need to get back on track. Instead, for various reasons of corruption, in my mind, the CIA has run away with this whole thing.
Yeah.
And they have to be stopped. That's the bottom line here.
Yeah, it's so many questions. It's almost like what scares the system more, people knowing the truth or people not trusting them anymore. Robert, I can't thank you enough for this time that we had a chance to really dig in for this long and talk about the book. And thank you for being Up and Adam, Robert.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the air. It's very important, as far as I'm concerned, to air out these conversations.
Some say life's where it begins. Straight to the stars is where it ends. Only to start again.
All right, get all the links. All the info on Robert K. Tanenbaum, the book itself, which is a fascinating read. Check it out in the show notes. Thanks to Robert for being Up and Adam. Wow. Guy doesn't pull punches, huh? I want to tell you about my friends at Life Elements. New to the Up and Adam family, but I have been tight with them for years. Based right here in SoCal, Atascadero, on El Camino Real. They're a woman and minority-owned company making small batch bath, body, and wellness products that are straight up alchemy. Their EcoSmart deodorant, absolute game changer. Their CBD relief sticks, legendary. You got to hit up lifeelements.com. But let me encourage you to swing by their spot in person. El Camino Real, 7425 El Camino Real. Yes, Sweet O, right back in the, tucked in the right back corner. You can't miss it. This is local love at its best. I truly believe what they're doing is spot on. Yes, the science, but these are great people. Check out lifeelements.com. And oh yeah, let them know you heard them on Up and Adam. All right, what a True Crime Tuesday. Tackled JFK with that guest. That was something. Thanks to Moonshiner Collective for being Up and Adam. Original music on the show called Start Again. Stream them wherever you get your music, moonshinercollective.com. Our thanks to Tamber Winery for giving us the Low Bro Studios at Tamber. Now their tasting room got a world-class wine. I love their wine. Their bubbles, their Pinot, their whatever. Josh is such a fantastic winemaker. Tamber Winery, Timbre, tamberwinery.com. And yeah, you could check them out in the village of Arroyo Grande. That is where their tasting room is. And to you for rating, reviewing, subscribing to the show wherever you listen to it. Sharing this with a friend does help. It really helps others discover what we're doing here in this community. So thank you very, very much. Hope your week's going great. Till tomorrow, I'm Adam Montiel. Appreciate you a lot. Thank you so much for being Up and Adam.
Some say life's where it begins. let's start again. Let's start again. We'll start